Hey all, welcome to Oddly Successful, a podcast that celebrates people who followed their instincts, went against the grain, and found success outside of the traditional 9 to 5. I am your host, Alexander Lefredo Dietrich. And before we begin, I'd like to remind you that you can find all of our podcast episodes on YouTube and Instagram by following at Oddly Successful, as well as your favorite podcast platforms. So, in today's episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Rebekah Greene-Lambert, who is a paraprofessional turned multi-hyphenate entrepreneur and the proud CEO of OmniCreations LLC, which we will get to what that is in a moment. But essentially, it's dedicated to, cannot speak already, dedicated to the cause to create a better reality for all. So yeah, welcome.
Hello. Thank you so
Hello.
much for such a beautifully eloquent introduction. I'm
Thank
taking
you.
notes already. I'm prepared. I'm like, all right, well, how can I make everything I'm doing better? Let's go.
Well, I appreciate that. Only you can make a grown man blush.
Bitch, that's what I'm talking about. I'll tell my husband that, but Lord have mercy, I'll take the compliment where I can get it.
So you're building an art company that provides spiritual advocacy and creative respect to all those who partake, while also managing your podcast of your own, which I want to get into as well. That's dedicated to providing a global reminder that no matter what your background, you're not alone in a post-COVID world. You mentioned those as some of your great successes, but let's start with the art company. How did that happen?
How did it happen? So, OmniCreations has multiple, as I would, in my opinion and my understanding of the world, everything is complicated. So when I'm
Fair.
about to go into everything I see and perceive in life, I assume is very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do my best to break down a very complicated, in a sense, complex concept for everybody,
Which is art.
which is art,
Mm-hmm.
which is the creation, which is everything. So let's start with the word OmniCreations. So omni is a pretext for God, and creation equals product, item, something that is tangible, something that can be seen, touched, felt.
It's a result.
A result, a consequence
Yeah.
of something. So the start of OmniCreations, aside from the fact that spirituality is something that's very dear to me as a person, and throughout all artists, well known and not, they all atone their ability and their talent to something outside of themselves, even though they may be the vessel that is putting these things out into the world. And not every single person has or needs to have a perspective of life that aligns with a carbon copy of somebody else's perspective of what that looks like, what that means, how that comes to fruition for them as a person. But the one thing that every person needs is a safe space. Everybody needs to feel like, and not just feel like, but actually have security. And as a paraprofessional transitioning into being an entrepreneur, I spent a lot of my time in environments that were supposed to be safe and secure. And if they weren't, for example, working in the public school system in modern America today. I'm not going to go into details, but it's not safe out here.
Yeah.
And when you experience how seriously unsafe it can be in the world, and for myself as a person who wants nothing more than to see people heal and flourish and embrace the beauty that can come in life, I realized when I started with the idea from my own events in life that I needed to do something that followed and aligned with the path of healing.
Mm.
And at first, I thought that, or not at first, in the beginning of my life as a person, I did a lot of studying on psychology, and I needed to for my own sanity. I
Mm.
needed to be able to figure out how to get through what I was going through without losing my mind.
Mm.
And building an art company specifically, a lot of time in my head, the ringing of the tortured artist,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the tragic soul lost to the wind of the cause of bringing light into the world. Well,
Alas.
alas, here I am. What can I say? Like I just want the world to be a better place, and
Yeah, yeah.
I it's really easy to say that. It's really easy to want the world to be a better place. But what's not so easy is learning yourself, learning how to implement boundaries within your own being,
Mm.
and how to contend with an environment that is not either not what you want it to be or not safe for you. And that's a really hard place to be, and it's a hard place to grow in.
Mm.
And art, throughout my entire life, has always been referenced as a tool for healing and for self discovery. And working in therapy and working with children, and even when I was working with adults, art was always like,
Mm.
whether a person was nonverbal or verbal, or, it didn't matter. It didn't matter how they connected with other people on a regular basis. If you gave them the opportunity to create something, they would. And
Mm.
like the joy that comes over a person when they have that sense of like, I made that. It could be a
Yeah.
line on a piece of paper. They made that, and
Yeah.
it's like how I needed to learn for myself
Mm.
how to get out of an environment that, while I was doing what I wanted and needed for my spirit in a sense of providing healing to the community around me to the best of my ability, it wasn't healing me as a person. It was damaging me as a person.
Mm.
And that recognition of damage within myself, I had to have the conversation with myself of like, okay, am I going to continue to push myself through something that I feel good about in one sense, but in a very different sense is hurting me? Like, where do I make this sacrifice?
Mm-hmm.
And through the wealth of knowledge that my parents taught me throughout life, if you suffer for a little bit and you work really hard towards something and you stay disciplined and you stay vigilant with yourself and you stay dedicated, you can create something so much greater than what you even originally thought it could be.
Mm.
And that knowledge that I could start something and I will have no idea how it ends. I hope I don't have to witness the end of it personally,
Yeah.
but I'm out here trying to live forever. It's just, it is what it is. And like, it's my silly little world and I get to create whatever I want in my own mind. And it's like, well, so does everybody else. And that's something that I really realized while working in ABA was it does
What's
not,
ABA?
huh?
What's ABA?
ABA is applied behavior analysis.
Is that the
Yeah.
psychology? Okay,
Hmm.
okay, cool. Yep.
So
Sorry. Go ahead.
that's what I was working as a registered behavioral therapist or
Gotcha. Okay.
technician,
Yep.
and the type of therapy that I was implementing and working with children and adults with was ABA, or applied
Mm.
behavior analysis.
Okay.
And applied behavior analysis is a data driven form of therapy. So there's very specific technical ways, like it's very logical form of therapy
Mm.
versus a therapy that's very emotion based, in a sense of it's more cognitive than it is subconscious.
Would you say what you're doing now though is more of the like the emotional side of it?
Yes.
Okay. And is that like being
Yes.
somebody who's doing ABA and like is like, yeah, I'm helping people, but it's kind of eating me alive as like, well, maybe I need to switch the healing practice to something more emotional?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Especially when you're doing something that's like, ABA was so emotionally fulfilling when there was a success, but when there was something that was hard that happened,
Mm.
it's so different for me. And it's so different for me because I don't know for sure if it's because I'm a type A person or if it's because I'm an ENTJ. But when I watch someone fail,
Hmm.
it eats me alive.
Yeah.
And I recognize that not everyone is like that. And
Hmm.
not everyone should be like that.
Right.
We need people who can handle that type of situation internally. Internally, on the external, I was doing amazing. I was doing great. People were like, "Wow, you're doing a great job." And inside, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing a great job." But like, I see how every flaw
Hmm.
is around me, and I see my limitation in capacity to be able to intervene. And that's something that I needed to take control of again. That sense of out of control or lack of control in my environment around me to be able to help was
Hmm.
not worth the sacrifice that I was taking mentally. So while working through that on a sense of reflection,
Hmm.
as well as healing from other things in my life and actively going through traumatic events in life, I had to work very hard, not only in a career path, but outside of my job. I'm trying to mentally, again, stay sane, stay supportive, stay an advocate, be as just as a person as I can be as
Hmm.
morally sound within myself, and trying to heal myself, and also be as aware of how much I let what I go through personally influence how I function at my job, which was a
Hmm.
major part of the reflection of, should I pursue entrepreneurship?
Mm.
Because not everybody should. You may be
Yeah.
like, there are times in life where we go through something that's hard during our career and challenging, and that could even go as far as for a relationship as well.
Yep.
And sometimes there is the need to reconfigure the path, and sometimes that path means exiting the building and going into a whole nother sector, but sometimes that means going to a different floor in that building.
Mm.
So for me, while I recognized that I could excel and succeed if I stayed in a path of ABA, because I was working on my bachelor's degree at the time and I had the choice of leaving legal studies and going into psychology for a bachelor's, rather, because I have an associate's in
Hmm.
psychology.
Yeah.
And I could have gotten, like, a clinic would be willing to pay for someone if they stay and sign contractually to get their master's degree, but you would have to become a board certified behavior analyst.
Mm.
And I just want to say to any and every person who is a BCBA, I am so proud of you.
Mm.
That job is
A lot.
a lot. It's for a warrior. It's for
Yeah.
emotional warriors. And I
Yeah.
applaud people who can do that and stick with it because it's needed. Because
Mhm.
that type of leadership and community leadership and one-to-one leadership is needed more now on a social level than ever before. And I recognized and heard about the influences of COVID amongst the societies where I lived and
Yeah.
the people and the environment, just walking down the street, like who wasn't affected by COVID? Everybody was.
Yeah.
And as one continues to ask themselves, what am I going to do about this? Like, what am I going to do? I couldn't just quit my job. I had rent to pay, like there had to be a plan. There had to
Yeah.
be action, but I needed to take action. So it started with talking with dear friends of mine about who I was as a person and the potential influence that I could take. And it took a lot of talking about and a lot of reflection of where I'm coming from in this and how I'm going to come across, because people are shocked when the girl with omnipotent tattooed on her chest has a business with a stance of exclusively inclusive.
Mm.
And I
What
stand on that.
What does that mean? Exclusively inclusive.
Exclusively inclusive means that no matter your background, no matter your age, no matter your spiritual practices, you will be respected and respectful. And
Mm.
or if you are not capable of being respectful, then you will be removed.
Mm.
And that is a boundary that the United States government, with the implementation of human rights and protections within workplace, and to me is something that is, or not is, should just be understood as the way that things are meant to be.
So
and
it. Go ahead. Yep.
and with being exclusively inclusive, being having that as like our main token,
Yeah.
you, or not you, we attract many different kinds of people. And that's what I want to do. I want everybody. I want literally everyone to be
Yeah.
a part of this. But the only way that everyone could be a part of it is if everyone took a step back and was able to reflect on, okay, how do I respect someone who I don't agree with? And not the person themselves, but maybe the type of art they make, maybe their style, maybe, there's just something that isn't yours.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to have somebody look just like me for me to recognize that there's a great deal that I can learn and implement for my own self understanding.
Well, I feel like I'm seeing like a common thread throughout your story, and you let me know if I'm, kind of catching on to this or not. But you started out doing this, the psychology and working with kids and adults, and there was a lot of good that came out of that. But there was a limit to that because it seemed, overly, at sometimes maybe overly logical or overly data reliant
Mm-hmm.
on helping people. But and again, when it worked. But you could tell as a person in your humanity that's like, well, there's some ambiguity here, but I'm not allowed to touch it through this program. But I know as a person how I would be able to handle that. And so it sounds like, taking that concept, you're like, well, one way to handle that is through art, through the artistic practice. You mentioned that spirituality is very important to you, and I'm assuming that there's this spiritual connection through the act of creation, which is maybe something that it sounds like Omni is going after. But in that, right now, tying that, I'll call it the how, the method that you're going after, into the principle of the why. You're seeing these people that you're bringing on to Omni. They do create various types of artwork. They do come from various types of backgrounds. And in that, there is not a singular type of way to welcome them. Very much in the same way, like ABA was not the only way. It works for some, but doesn't work for all. And it seems like Omni is kind of this place that you're using. It's like, all right, we have to be willing to explore the ambiguity of helping everybody where they're at. And there's not a full one size fits all, but a singular unifying rule or concept is like, if we know that, then we have to be, as you mentioned, exclusively inclusive, which is we ought to take a step back so that way we can identify where each individual person is coming from, and therefore we can cater and help each other cater that safe experience for each individual person. Is that like a good summation of
I
where
would
you're at?
say it's absolutely perfect. And you want to know what we call that?
What's that?
It's called a boundary.
A boundary. Yes. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I want to go on record here and say something.
Hmm.
I have a question for you. Do you know what a lot of people struggle with?
Setting boundaries.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's what we need. Like it and it and I'm going to tell you. I can't tell you how I know from my own personal experience. But I can tell you one thing. I know for a fact the number one thing that most people truly struggle with is setting and holding a boundary.
What are the repercussions of that? Because I feel like, as somebody who I think most people, and may be projecting, but I think most people in one way, shape, or form, as you mentioned, struggle with setting boundaries. And I think a lot of, at least for me, there's always this shame of like, well, if I set this boundary, maybe I'm somehow hurting or offending or whatever this other person. Like maybe I should be the one who folds because surely they have a reason that's better than mine. But I mean, that sounds good in theory, but what are the repercussions of, I think, succumbing to that, would you say?
Of succumbing to not implementing the boundary or succumbing to
Yeah.
setting the boundary?
Not implementing the boundary, but I'd also like to hear the latter part of that as well.
For not setting the boundary,
Hmm.
the I so from my personal perspective, I am on the opposing side cuz I know how bad it hurts to set the
Hmm.
boundary and uphold it and how
Yes.
badly that hurts emotionally, and
Hmm.
my instinctive response of what I want to say to you. And I don't know if I want to say this because you're my friend,
Hmm.
but the worst thing that comes from not following through on setting a boundary is the fact that you are weakening yourself.
Yeah.
You are not being as strong of a person as you're capable of being.
Hmm.
And as someone who understands and is learning, as we all are, how to live my life in a more love oriented way, a major component of expressing love and maintaining love and creating love is maintaining boundaries, is recognizing where and when and how. Because when somebody respects your boundaries, I can't verbally express how
Yeah.
more beautiful, how
Hmm.
more safe, how truly just a blessing. Cause like there is no other word for it. Like there are certain things in life that just like they are just so uplifting in the sense that it gives you physically that it's a blessing.
Yeah.
And it's like on a logic based term, I don't know how to explain that.
It's something that Omni would do great at. Maybe not necessarily the previous rendition of, again, ABA has its strengths, but seems like something that's like, hey, this might be missing. This is an Omni thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and well, that's why I asked the question because, for me personally, one of the things that has helped me get better at it is, pain has its purpose, right? And so if I can remind myself of the pain, what you said is whenever I don't set a boundary, I'm weakening myself as a person. Well, what good am I if I'm a weak person to my friends and my family and things like that?
To
So
yourself.
to myself. So what it's not necessarily pick your the pleasure, right? There's the false pleasure of just succumbing to the boundary, right? Because then you don't have to deal with that
And
confrontation.
let me pause you real fast.
Hmm.
Has anybody ever crossed a boundary with you, and them crossing that boundary in the long term made you feel good about yourself?
Oh no, absolutely not.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so there is right, yeah. So there's this, okay, well now you're faced with two pains, which is you either can do this confrontation now, or you don't, and the repercussions of, well, now you've weakened yourself, now you're being trod upon, now you really can't be there for your friends and family, now you can't really even be there for yourself. Yeah, you're going to pay this debt in the long run, and you don't feel it maybe right away, although I would argue that you do. But this is exponentially worse
Yes.
than just saying, here's where I stand, you are welcome to take it or leave it.
Yes. And this idea of I think people have just gotten too complacent with being walked over.
Yeah.
And that's like, for me, I've been through enough. You're not going to walk
Mm.
over me. You're not going to make me feel worse than I've ever made myself feel, and I'm not going to allow myself to feel as bad as I have felt before, cuz I'm going to act better
Mm.
than that. I'm going
Yeah.
to push myself to be in better environments, to be around people who respect themselves and who respect the people around them and know and like that's the thing too is you can be respectful and be around somebody who's dog shit. You can be respectful to somebody and have no idea what their life experience is or was or has been like. That's the precious gem that being respectful is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and you now starting this company, right? That puts you in this role, right? And it sounds like you're already doing this with that overarching theme of exclusive inclusivity. Um, but you're now the facilitator of that environment.
I
And
am.
so, like, what does that mean for, the roles and the dynamics? And, like, there's also, especially when you're working with artists, where criticism and feedback is a natural part of the process. Otherwise, they don't get better, right?
Yes.
You need to be pointed out to your blind spots. So, like, how do you? I feel like a lot of times we hear the words and these concepts of inclusivity. There's this very nice connotation to it, which is great. Um, but I think there's also the utility of, well, hey, let's get into this confrontation to make you better. How do you do that? And how do you maintain and facilitate an environment that provides that while still helping people know, like, hey, you're good here. Like, this is coming from a place of love.
Yeah. So with and I would say this it starts with communication.
Hmm.
And it is 100% communication based because I could talk to you like this and I could say, "You know what, AJ? I understand that you are a part of this team and we are so grateful to have you on this team. We're going to discuss X project.
Hmm.
Within X project, these are the list out of alterations or potential areas for improvement."
Hmm.
And then I would ask you, why do you think those areas specifically may need improvement? Because really what what actually matters in someone improving upon themselves is, do they realize that they need that improvement? Do they realize that they could be better?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, for me, I see it as like when my parents would discipline me.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were very, very disciplined parents, and they taught me at a very young age, every choice you make in life has a consequence. It's how you go about receiving those consequences, and what kind of consequences do you want in life. And the way that I communicate, the way that you say something, the words that you say, that makes a lot of a difference in how a message is received to a person. Because what I just said to you versus, man, you are really up today, is it's the same, in the same essence. They are the
Yeah.
same. Both of those are feedback of a perspective.
Well, I want to pause here real quick because one thing that I want to point out, which is interesting and I think would be helpful, and I'd love your feedback on this, is like if you are on the other side of feedback and somebody mentions, like, hey, how do you think that you could be better? There may be that ping inside of your head that sinks your heart just as much as, hey, you're fucking up. Probably because in your own head, when you hear, hey, how do you think you could be better? You're hearing, hey, you fucked up, right? And I think that's worth noting because I believe in an awareness of that. If you can be like, well, why did I take it that way? Why am I not taking this at face value?
Or
It
why am I
could,
not being grateful that I'm being given the opportunity to improve
right,
myself?
right, exactly. It's the reason I point that out is because, like, it could in in the self reflection and the observation of how an individual takes words and prescribes their own meaning to them. There's
Mm-hmm.
a step of what we hear and what we feel about that.
Yes.
If we can start seeing patterns of, like, how am I switching this in my head and then make that healthier,
Mm-hmm.
that could unlock a lot as well.
It would.
Because imagine on the flip side, let's say you have like a very good, like, hey, I'm here to figure out and learn more, then again, it's not good that somebody may come to you and be like, hey, you fucked up. But you could hear that and be like, all right, that person said that a way I didn't really like, but let's see what I can correct about it if there's something worth correcting in that feedback. Right.
Boom.
So yeah,
That is it.
that's
That right there. That is it. That is, I have been given a lot of shit in life. And people who know, they know. But I will not allow that to define my character and who I am and how I act. And guess what? Neither do you. Neither does
Mhm.
anybody. At the end of the day, we are truly in control of how and what we do with what we have. And that is a lot easier said to grasp than it is to be implemented. And that's
Mhm.
because you have to be taught. I am only capable of being as aware of myself as I am because my parents taught me. Because I grew up and was raised in an environment that, despite having to contend with a lot, I was able to swiftly heal and progress, which led to me being capable of avoiding very serious, potentially lifetime emotional mental damage.
Mhm.
And when you experience very severe trauma as a child and period throughout life, it affects your brain. It affects, not even on a physiological level, it affects the brain, but on a psychological level, it affects the brain. And it takes time to sit with yourself and ask yourself questions and recognize within yourself what it is that you may be experiencing and your feelings on it.
Mm.
Because that ping of like pain and ow of like, man, somebody said this to me. Okay, well, somebody may have said that to you, but what you're feeling inside of you is actually a recognition of truth. And subconsciously in your head, your feeling is the subconscious part of your body being like, hey, there's something for you to take note of here.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Your feelings can be wrong. You can have feelings that are incorrect. We can have misjudgments. We are allowed to be incorrect. And I think that
Yeah.
the striving for perfection on like a a like, to me, I call it spiritual level. But what I mean
Mm-hmm.
is the combination of mental and emotional being, ego, like that element of self is something that we have to nurture, and you have to do it yourself. And religions offer a a avenue of that exploration.
Mm.
And that's something that I recognized early on as a child, because I was going through stuff and because the people around me safely were utilizing it as a tool for them to also have community and understanding and functioning in the world, which is very chaotic. The world has always been chaotic.
Yeah.
It's just that people are older now.
Well, I think like when you were talking about, let's say you hear a piece of feedback and that makes you feel a certain way and that you can be incorrect about that. The way that I've thought about this is your body is essentially pathway, like electric pathways, right? Um, and I feel that the term feelings takes on this cliche meaning to a lot of people when it shouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
because from my understanding, and I'd love for you to correct me on this because I'm not an expert in psychology, but just based off the stuff
For
that
the record,
I've
I
read
ain't
for
an expert.
myself.
I'm just educated.
You're
I
educated,
am
yeah,
just
that's right.
educated.
You're more educated than I am. But right, so let's say you have the system of beliefs, right, and that is this bundle of electrons, or not electrons, but you get what I mean,
Yes.
nerves in your brain, right? Um, and so you hear something, and that hearing of information, because there's a certain bundle of neurons in your brain, then travels to that bundle, which then sends signals to your hormones, to your muscles, which then make you literally feel a
Mm-hmm.
certain way.
Do you know
And
why that
so,
is?
why is that?
That's because you are taught that words have meaning.
You are right, exactly. Yeah. So when you hear those words, you prescribe them to a meaning. When you grow up a certain way, you have certain traumas, you prescribe certain things to a meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the interesting thing is electricity takes the path of least resistance. And so the way that I've always thought about it on a physiological level is, if the game is the game, right? Is if you can carve a larger path in your own brain that's wider, that's more powerful, you begin to bundle those pathways together on your own through repetition, through awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and you begin to create a wider channel than the one that was there. It's hard because the one that's there is pretty freaking wide. But if you call attention to it, the original one can begin to atrophy, meaning it gets narrower, while the new one begins to get wider. And that once you get past that physical threshold of where you've now created a new path of least resistance, the old one doesn't go away. You'll still get channels of it, which is fine, but
Mm-hmm.
begins to literally get easier.
Yes.
It
Correct.
actually gets
It
physically
it
easier
it
for good
physically
things to
gets
happen to you.
easier. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's why, like, I hear like, oh, you just gotta be attentive to your feelings, and people are like, oh yeah, I'll just do that. But it's like, no, there's actually
It's a lot of
something
work.
literally happening to
Correct.
you
Yes.
that scientifically is making you feel better. It's not just some woo-woo thing that goes on.
Holy shit. There's science behind it. Oh my
Science,
god.
yes. but part of that, right? And now you brought up spirituality, religion. We'll just say a system of beliefs, right? That I think certain ones can help different people in certain ways. I also think there could be a utility to that. Like, so for instance, I come from a Christian background. One of the tenets of Christianity is if you give yourself to Jesus, right? God loves you, right? God loves you anyway. That's a cool thing, but the former part makes it smoother flow, I guess. But point of the fact is, right, is God loves me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and so if I get met with criticism or somebody kicks me while I'm down, whatever that is, I can always carve that path as like, well, this person may not like me, but God loves me. And it gives me something to shoulder on, that the
Interesting.
conversation isn't always this person doesn't like me. It's this person doesn't like me, but I can always carve this open. God loves me.
Yeah, that makes
You know?
sense. That makes so many things in my life make sense, because what you just described, I don't think I've ever mentally dealt with. And like,
Mm,
I understand so much the concept of what you mean exactly, which is when someone does something harmful to you, uh like, for me, when something like that happens, my perception is, did like my inner monologue that is negative is, did I do the best that I could? Did I really take
mm,
as much love in my actions as I could have? And like, it's never this person doesn't like me, because I don't care if people like me or not. That's never been something that like is a part of how I function, but I understand that's only because of how I was taught to exist in the world.
mm-hmm.
So, like, my concept and relationship with the figure of God and the existence of that and the presence of that in life is very different,
Yeah.
which is also like one of the main reasons why I picked OmniCreations as the name, because like we have two 100% different concepts of God.
Mm-hmm.
But I 100% know what you're talking about, understand what you're talking about, and I know that you are speaking the truth,
Mm-hmm.
because it is your truth to be spoken.
Yeah.
And there's so much beauty in that, and there's so much that like I just learned something about myself,
Mm,
because your experience, which is different from mine, taught me a reflection. And
mm.
that is truly what it means to recognize the difference in being in your own feelings.
Yeah.
And I not once, I don't think, I hope not anyway, have ever told you or asserted my perspective of God as a toppling over yours.
No, not once. Yeah, and that's one of the things I appreciate about you is like we have. By the way, everybody, Beck and I have these conversations a lot,
Yes.
and this is a new one. This is not pre-recorded. Well, I mean, yeah, it's pre-recorded
Well, when they're
because the
hearing it,
podcast
but this is
pre-recorded.
a live conversation.
This
We're
is a
actually
live
recording.
conversation, all right. But yeah, I mean, like, and that's the thing. And again, for instance, one of the tenets that I hold is quote unquote God speaks to us in the way that we're meant to be spoken to. And I know this may be heresy to many people, but like for me, it's like, well, some people resonate with Christianity, some people resonate with Buddhism, some people resonate with spirituality or their own relationship with God, or whatever that is, whatever makes sense to them, that gives them a series of belief systems in which they can shoulder upon to navigate them through life.
Yes.
Now, whatever label you prescribe to that is fine. Because again, I'm leaning on mine, which is in the Bible, right? Essentially, is God's word is above man's word. So to me, it's whatever the universe or God is saying to you. It doesn't matter if it's called Christianity or Islam
What?
or Judaism
Holy.
or anything like
He
that.
said.
But I know. But do you resonate with something, whether or not it's prepackaged or not? Does it make sense and does it make you healthier? If it does, run with it. If it doesn't, find something else. It's all good. But
Literally. And
yeah.
it can be that easy. And when you respect yourself as an individual, because as you have confirmed, I don't project myself onto other people. But God knows, I love
Yeah.
hearing other people's perspective, because especially on spiritual topics, because I,
Mhm.
as a person who has been paid to pay attention to how people behave, I know how important it is in a lot of different people's culture and a
Mhm.
lot of different people's communities and a lot of societies, and some would say in every single person's existence. Every single way, there's some type of, and even in atheism, it is inclusive of the perspective of the disbelief that it is not existent. So it's like no
Mhm.
matter what, it is all connected.
Yeah.
And you cannot truly make a point of it not being. And
Hmm.
when you respect and you listen and reflect on how it is within your own self, you can really start to see and implement and take part of the beauty and all of those other things.
Hmm.
I have studied and researched so many different religions, and just out of my own like personal love for their existence.
Hmm.
And I understand not everybody is into that.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to be.
Yeah.
So I take what I've learned from these very, very different, in some ways, on the surface, and I go out here, I work my little job until I can't handle it anymore, and then I figure out building a business, and then I get online and I make a video about it, and then dollar signs. And
And then
somehow it just
dollar
works
signs.
that way.
How does that tie into? I mean, I know you also mentioned like you do a podcast. I want to touch on that as well.
Oh,
But
yes.
like, how does this stuff? Would you say tie into what's the podcast called, by the way?
Ring ring hello.
Ring Ring Hello. Okay, and this is the entrepreneurial podcast that's like really trying to tie people's backgrounds together.
Yes.
How'd you say what we're talking about ties into that?
And to the podcast specifically.
Yeah. Like, do you bring these topics up with some of your guests, or like, is it
So it
more
is, we are lightly scripted in a sense of we want
okay?
people who are coming on to know that what type of question I'm going to be asking is very generic in the beginning. And
Hmm.
from a very generic question, you can choose based off of the person who you're talking to's comfortability, because the information that they share with you. And from
Hmm.
that, you can really find out about a person. And I would say it ties back to the podcast in a sense of there are some people who we have on, and there is no discussion of their spiritual practice, if in their nature or not. And then there are people who come on and I share very spiritually enlightening and loving conversations.
Hmm.
By providing a platform that is not based off of one of the many major differences and arguing points that people like to make in the world, all I do is ask, where did you grow up? Where are you from? Tell me about your childhood.
Yeah.
And from that, I learn so much about a person. And not everybody needs, or not even needs, not everyone has the same experience in life.
Yeah.
Not everyone has
Yeah.
the same level of awareness and understanding.
Hmm.
But everybody deserves to be respected.
Hmm.
Everyone deserves love, and everyone deserves justice.
Hmm.
So from that, it becomes so much of the I that a lot of times people get stuck in the, well, what if this person doesn't like me? Like, so? Do you like yourself? Do you love
Yeah.
yourself? Like, I tell myself I love myself on the regular. I act like I love myself so that I can continue to survive, so I can get to a place of thrive. Because I
What?
get tired of having to survive out here.
Yeah.
And like, truly, you have to get to a point of being tired of being tired.
Well, I mean, we've had so many guests on here already where I'm telling you, so many of these conversations come to like, you will face pain in your life, and it's good because that is what forces you to change for the better. Like,
Yes. Like,
and every
respectfully.
conversation has come to that in some way, shape, or form. I love it. I love when these themes begin to just like, and you hear them in different ways from different people. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Everything is connected and it's okay. At the end of the day, hey, I had to acknowledge where I was not where I wanted to end up. And
Mm,
I had to face myself and recognize where I was putting myself, what I was doing to myself, and how that was damaging me, and stop denying myself realities. Like, the learning to not make excuses for yourself is
mhm,
truly the key to success. Since we're on oddly successful, that therein it is the actual action of success, because it will always come back to a point of, like, if you mentally stop yourself, you will never pick up a pen. You will never write that book. You will never save that person's life. You will never get that dog. You will never cry over your first heartbreak. There is so much beauty to be had in experiences of pain in life, and we are capable of more.
mm.
That's why it hurts people who are philanthropists to see the world in pain, to want to go out and do good for other people, because they're in it is the recognition of the potential. And a lot of people have not been taught that they have the potential to do better. The shifting of perspective, and then the recognition of, oh my gosh, if I have God within myself, that means that God exists in everything around me.
Omnipotent, I would say.
Some would say. What a goose, I tell you. And it's just, uh, and because we're friends, but like, I am this level of passionate as a human being. I am,
Oh yeah,
this is,
I love it.
this is your girl all the time. And
Yep.
that's the thing. I have no shame about feeling my feelings. This is me feeling my feelings. My feelings aren't intense. I don't know how to help somebody who does not have intense feelings. And that is another reason why I struggled doing the job that I did. Because if I was in a circumstance where the person was emotionless, I don't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah.
I feel everything. So, as somebody who, again, I had to acknowledge that within myself, like, and then from there, it goes to a place of, okay, well, how are the people around me acting? What are their circles like? Who are their closest people? And do I feel like those people would be safe in a room with me?
Yeah.
And this is a conversation you do not tell people these thoughts that you have. People need to learn how to have something for themselves, because the
Mm,
conversations that I have with myself, they are not to be shared with other people.
hmm.
They are for me, myself, and I. So long as who I am on the outside is as respectful as who I am on the inside, that is what makes the difference. Because if you're a nasty person in your mind, how you act is going to be nasty. Doesn't matter if somebody does something terrible to you. On God, it does not matter if somebody does something terrible to you. If you make it a mission in your life to go out and then continue to degrade them in some way, belittle, or make like your life about what they did, all I can say is actions have consequences.
Hmm.
I have nothing but love and nothing but the greatest desire to see every single person that I have ever interacted with in life succeed and heal. And the only reason that I can truly say that and mean that is because I know what it feels like to lose somebody and really lose somebody.
Well, it's like, going back to like one of the things I struggle with is self doubt. And I think you pointed this out, something you mentioned, I'm never going to allow myself to get back to that level, which, inferred in the first place that you didn't think that you would allow yourself to get to a higher level.
Yeah.
And there are these, I think a lot of people, we have these emotions and we have these thoughts about ourselves, and our immediate gut reaction is to try to eliminate them. Versus, I think what you did is repurpose them. And in my case, like doubt, for instance, like, uh, trying to write a book, doing this podcast, like writing an EP, these things that are creative acts for me that I'm just like, I'm not sure if anybody's ever gonna like it. I doubt that I'll be able to do it. And then repurposing that says like, well, I want to doubt that I want to doubt that I'd ever be the type of person who wouldn't try,
Absolutely.
you know? And it sounds like you repurposed
You have
a
to.
lot of
That it's a
those
way of
emotions.
surviving. It's
They're
emotional
there.
survival.
Yeah. They're going to be there whether you like them or not. You might as well use them in your favor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People we all go through stuff in life. Like you will experience pain. And
Yeah.
thankfully with mental and emotional pain, if you can build up an emotional endurance within your own brain to think to think differently, it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
just say it in a broad way because it is such an action. That's why
Yeah.
therapy is so important for people who weren't taught how to love themselves as children,
Yeah.
because like I have only gone to therapy a handful of times.
Yeah. And they help certain people. I mean,
But you have to
there's
also, you have it's the combination. You also have to take the
yeah.
action.
Right, 100%. I mean, but yeah, I think like what it seems like what you're getting at is there's not a one size fits all.
Yes.
And there's, I think some solutions are more advertised, for lack of a better term, than
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, like, if the main thing that's advertised isn't working for you, do you
Maybe it's
trust
because you need to do
yourself?
something else.
But yeah, do you trust yourself to say like, huh, maybe I got to figure something else out? Um, and that, but you have to be open enough to try things that may come from unconventional sources. Yeah.
Or things you
So,
haven't done before.
or things you
I
haven't
ain't
done
never owned a
before.
business before. I feel like so many people just stop themselves before they even get started, and it's like, please
Yeah.
don't.
Well, on that, like I know we're
Cutting
on
you off.
top of the hour, and part of your business, you mentioned that you have an upcoming 2025 release of a short stories, Making My Way to Japan.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And like, do you have any more release dates, or is like right now we're 2025? Like, what's it about? If you can share, when's it coming out? Where can people find it?
You can find it. Well, it is not released. I am in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So, Making My Way to Japan is going to be a combination of digital short stories and poems that will have drawings that I've made. So, think of like a storybook, but not a storybook, but also words and poems, and then art attached to those, and it will be available on omnicreationsart.com for
Lovely.
digital download. It will be as reasonably priced as possible, ladies and gents. And the first book in the series will have Through the Thicket, which is a short story that I wrote about a girl, and she experiences a dream, and but it's not written as a dream. It's written as an experience
Yeah.
and a poem, and I have not figured out what art will be attached to it yet, but it will be very brief. You know, they're not going to be very long, and that's why it's going to be a series. So
Yeah.
it's one poem, one short story for each book. They're digital. And and it's mostly just meant to be a way to help give people a moment in life. Like a lot of
Yeah.
what I do as an artist is meant to give you the experience of exploration. So like I'm also a pianist, and I have a video on YouTube at The Girl with the Ramen Tattoo, where you can also find Ring Ring Hello podcast. And there is a video called A Moment of Exploration. And that is 100% just me playing the piano. Like, there is no music. Like, I don't know how to read music. I know how to play the piano. I don't
Yeah.
know how to read music. I know how to play the guitar. So, like, while I have very briefly in my life been given formal training, it doesn't make sense to me because
Yeah.
music is just something that I feel. So, poetry is my way of attaching a logistic to music, which is something that I feel, while painting is something that I see as a very logic based thing. I look at it like I think about it.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yes, thank you.
Cool, you bet. So, making my way to Japan, coming out 2025, and you can find it at when it comes out at omnicreationsart.com. And then you also have a couple social handles. I know you dropped a few, but you said your Instagram is omnicreations.art. That's for OmniCreations of business, and your personal is the girl with the ramen tattoo. I love that, which is on YouTube and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Girl with the Ramen Tattoo on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And then people can listen to your podcast, which is Ring Ring Hello Pod
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Awesome.
Thank
Cool.
you.
You bet. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so proud of you. And I'm so
I'm
grateful to be here. And I've, to everybody listening, love yourself today. You're worth it.
That is phenomenal, phenomenal advice, because when you tell yourself that, right, you begin to make that new bundle of neurons and make that path a little bit
Build
wider.
that bridge, I tell ya.
Build that bridge. I love it. Well, and to everybody listening, thank you for listening to this episode of Oddly Successful. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review, because I mean, I think this was just an incredibly just spiritually charged episode. Is awesome. There's so much
Yes.
great wisdom to be had by Rebekah here, and by leaving reviews, that that helps this show spread, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that could use the wise words from Rebekah here. So by leaving a review, you help this message reach those people. And with that said, thank you again for listening. And until next time, stay weird.
Bye.